A contrast in the number of people and the people we're seeing in there, including George Santos.
An expelled member of Congress who still, as a former member of Congress not convicted of a crime, has a right to be there on the House floor and has decided to come tonight. No invitation necessary. So he's there, just one of the many storylines that we see developing on the floor tonight.
Former member of Congress not convicted of a crime yet. Now, of course, that was expelled former member Representative George Santos, who took a break from making cameos to make an appearance at last night's State of the Union address. And what a whirlwind night it was for Mr. Santos, or whoever the hell he's pretending to be today. Now, ahead of President Joe Biden's address, Fox News correspondent Chad Pergram caught up with Santos at the Capitol and peppered him with some questions. Take a look.
This is your first time back in the building?
Yes, it's my first time back in the building.
Okay, and you came why?
State of the Union, why not?
Okay.
It's a privilege.
Have you received any of your colleagues or talked to them?
I was just visiting with some of my colleagues in a very bipartisan fashion.
And what's it like to be back, though?
It's different. It's different. Definitely the People's House. It's always a humbling experience, and it's always great to be back.
Do you think this will be the last time you come, or
I don't know.
you have your legal?
I don't know. I don't know about that. I couldn't. If I knew that, I'd be guessing the lottery first.
Are you trying to? I don't know. Do you want to come back someday in another congressional district, or?
I don't put anything past my desire to run for office at this point. But right now, it's just I'm a spectator. I'm just here watching.
Where are you sitting?
I don't know yet.
Who are you, like a guest of someone?
No, I'm a former member. I have privileges. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to photo bomb.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
How are you?
Thank you.
So as you mentioned there, as a former member, he has the privilege to attend. So a little bit more on that from Business Insider. Though he's been denied at least some of the typical post-service perks enjoyed by other former members, the US Association of Former Members of Congress previously told Business Insider they wanted nothing to do with him. It would have taken yet another act of Congress, specifically a resolution by the House, to keep him from entering the chamber again. And obviously that was not a step that they took, but just because Santos is allowed on the floor doesn't mean he gets a prime seat for the State of the Union. Now, seats reserved for the expelled rep who reportedly spent campaign money on Botox and OnlyFans, just in case you forgot that, are way, way, way back in the nosebleeds. And while Biden began his route to the State of the Union address, CNN's Jake Tapper and Jamie Gangel discussed Santos's presence at the event.
George Santos is back. I'm told that he was sitting in some seats and that GOP floor staff politely asked him to move from the seats to the back so that current members would have a seat, and that he, much to one person's surprise, that he politely complied with that, and he's now standing in the back. But there is just no end with George Santos.
Thirsty George Santos.
Standing room only, apparently, for expelled, disgraced former members of Congress. And of course, he literally has no purpose in being there. Well, actually, he had some purpose, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But he clearly wasn't wanted there. And he was doing some live tweeting of the event and criticizing Joe Biden on his timeliness. He posted this: "Hey POTUS, you're late. Rude." Obviously trying to get a little bit of attention there. And I noted that he did have a bigger purpose in being there. We'll get to that in a second. I want to bring you guys in on this first. It feels like we'll never rid ourselves of George Santos. Just when you think he's gone, just when he's gotten out of the limelight, he just pops right back up again. And I really didn't expect to see him when I was watching the State of the Union. Although honestly, as you know, maybe his biggest fan, it was a pleasant surprise for me. What did you guys think?
A lot of mainstream media don't give you honest news. We do. You know why? Because of you. Paid membership on YouTube makes all the difference. Hit the join button below and you become the hero that sustains us. Yeah, and maybe he's just a fan of politics. In fact, maybe he's one of the only fans. Okay, again, later in the show, a story about how that joke can harm you. Anyways, So George Santos, it cracks me up. He cracks everybody up. That's why we cover him, and he knows that, and that's why he went. So what is he looking for? More attention. Of course. And you know what? I say well played. Why not? Look, the more he's in the news, the bigger his name is, and the more he could charge for cameos. So that's how this world works. And I think the whole thing's silly. I don't do any of that, and I try to actually help folks, but Santos is not in that game. He's in a different game. He's in the me game. And if you're in that game, going and having everybody interview you and talk about you in the State of the Union in a situation where you're allowed in the building, I don't hate the player, you know. It is what it is, and not only can he charge higher prices for whatever scam he's running, or just flat out cameos, which are not scams, but also he can't help himself. He loves that spotlight. So I don't know if I'm allowed to say drama queen, but whatever the equivalent is, that's who this brother is, and we all know it.
Yeah, you know, my only regret with George Santos is that he didn't find my OnlyFans. You know what I'm saying? If he would have stumbled across me a bit sooner, if I would have hopped on the platform a bit earlier, maybe we would have been good. But no, he probably would have liked him a little bit of snacks, and I'm gonna have to hit his line. But you know, the thing about George Santos to me that really cracks me up is while he's really entertaining, he's actually a really deviant person. You know what I'm saying? Like, this dude took money from a dog's GoFundMe, a sick dog's GoFundMe. He took money from that. And then I don't know how many tens of thousands of dollars that he just straight ganked from people, including people who were helping his campaign, who were on board with what he was doing. I mean, I've always said about him, luckily for us, as far as we know, he's not a violent person because he's nuts. I mean, like, he's legitimately like not okay. You know, I used to say stuff like maybe if he would have dropped out of the race, you know, and not actually entered the halls of Congress, he wouldn't be in this position. But I don't know, man, because at the end of the day, he just rips people off left and right. So people like George Santos, ultimately, they end up in prison. And he, you know, if he can't stop ripping people off, that's what it is.
Yeah. And I mean, just further evidence of his insanity. And let's be honest, the reason he went to the State of the Union address was to get attention, because he decided, apparently during the State of the Union, to file the necessary paperwork to launch his primary campaign against Representative Nick LaLota. Yes, George Santos is running for office again, this time in a different district. Now, it's important to note that LaLota led the bipartisan effort to expel Santos from Congress back in September. So a little more on his decision to run. Paperwork filed with the FEC on Thursday indicates Santos will run for the Republican-leaning 1st Congressional District, a suburban seat in Suffolk, Long Island, represented by Representative Nick LaLota. That district is further east and more Republican-leaning than the nearby district that elected Santos in 2022. So, in other words, he's pulling a Lauren Boebert and running in a completely separate district. And he did formally announce his candidacy last night on Twitter. Tweeted, "I just witnessed a weak, frail president deliver spin and lies to the American people from inside the chambers. I have made several personal sacrifices in the name of serving the American people." I'm sorry. I knew I wasn't going to be able to read that without laughing. It's just so absurd. "My promise is that I will never back down because of my love for this country and misusing the funds that people donate to my campaign." That was me editorializing. He didn't actually say that, but he did say this: "New York hasn't had a real conservative represent them since I left office arbitrarily." Yeah, that's what happened. Thanks to rhino empty suits like Nick LaLota, he is willing to risk the future of our majority and the future of this country for his own political gain. Of course, he didn't actually leave office arbitrarily. He was expelled. He was expelled by members of his own party. And then finally, he wrapped it up by saying, "After a lot of prayer and conversation with my friends and family, I have made a very important decision that will shake things up. Tonight, I want to announce that I will be returning to the arena of politics and challenging Nick for the battle over New York 1. I look forward to debating him on the issues and on his weak record as a Republican. the fight for our majority is imperative for the survival of the country. And then he ended it with, God bless you all, and we are off to the races. Of course, he's facing a long shot in this election, assuming that he's not sentenced to prison for wire fraud, money laundering, and all of the myriad of other crimes he's been charged with before the June 25th primary. But honestly, I don't know if you guys had this sort of inclination, but when I saw him at the State of the Union, and when I saw that interview where he was being very cagey about whether or not he was going to run, I was like, oh, okay, he's trying to make a political comeback. This person is shameless. He hasn't been successful in other realms. He had a brief period of time where he was making some good money on Cameo, but his moment of fame subsided. So of course he's going to try to get back in as an elected official, although his chances are, equivalent to that of a snowball's chances in hell. I really don't see him even making a dent in this primary race.
Yeah, so I want to be clear. I joke around about him getting Botox and OnlyFans and stuff. I don't care about that at all. I think that a lot of prominent politicians, including Democratic leaders, might have gotten Botox. Who cares? That's not the issue. The issue is using campaign funds to do that. But one of our members wrote in, Brunswick Dragon, saying, why isn't disgrace a thing anymore? That's a good question. That's why we like to do the show with our members. Hit the join button below if you want to join them. Well, there's a simple answer to that. It's Donald Trump. Donald Trump did everything that was disgraceful, and all it did was help him. So people look at that and go, well, this guy became president by doing, some of the things he did I can't imagine anything more disgraceful, right? And it totally worked. He got more famous, he got more power, he got more everything. And I defy people to find the difference between George Santos and Donald Trump. Santos ripped off charities. So did Trump. Trump had to pay a giant fine in New York, because he ran a fake charity. He would take people's money who thought they were contributing to good causes like cancer and helping kids who are underprivileged, etc., and he'd go buy giant portraits of himself. Even George Santos never did anything that absurd and silly and over the top. Imagine if Santos had bought a 6-foot picture of himself. Everybody make that joke 24 hours a day. Trump actually did that twice with his charity, and had to disband it because he's a criminal. He started a fake university, had to pay a $25 million fine for that. Well, to be fair, Santos is a really bad guy because he ripped off veterans. So did Donald Trump. Donald Trump on several instances, including in his charity, ripped off veterans. And what did he do? He got rewarded for it. So disgrace is not a thing anymore, especially if you're a right winger. It is not only not frowned upon, oftentimes it's celebrated. And so hard to blame Santos and say, wow, I can't, he's so outrageous. He's so different than other politicians. And by the way, Trump and Santos are flagrant and flamboyant liars, but it's not like everybody else in that building isn't telling lies 24/7. Oh no, I'm not doing this for my donor. I really think that drug prices should be higher because that's good for America and my voters. They're all liars. What difference does it make?
Yeah, the only real difference to me between Trump and George Santos is that Santos is like 40 years younger than Trump. That's like kind of the only difference. And one of the biggest similarities between the two of them is that them becoming like, official members of public life, one president, one member of Congress, is ultimately what struck their downfall, brought them into the spotlight too much to where the feds got involved. Not that they wouldn't have before, not that Trump hasn't been sued literally thousands of times. But yeah, everywhere you look at it, they're just as ridiculous, and they both make things up for absolutely no reason. Maybe George Santos has him a little bit beat on that, but then again, Trump has like 40 more years, so that probably isn't true. But my favorite part of that whole thing was when, Santos was like, I spoke to God, God, because God famously loves liars and cheaters. God said, you know what? Go ahead and go to another district and screw over a different set of constituents. Like, because God famously doesn't care about the little guy. The Republicans think they could just, as long as they put that 3-letter word anywhere, they just sprinkle it on there. then that just legitimizes everything they say. Look at what the North Carolina guy, Mark Robinson, that lunatic out there who's running for governor. God this, God that. So that justifies the hatred. But
yeah.
This is America.
And look, last thing, the main offense of George Santos and why he got kicked out of Congress and is being pursued criminally is that he misused campaign funds for all the stuff we've been talking about, Botox, et cetera. That's exactly what Donald Trump did. Donald Trump is also under criminal investigation in New York for misusing campaign funds for campaign finance violations. He had the one that he had with the porn star. He has issued, that's the one he's being charged on because he did hush money and et cetera. But then using the campaign funds, as soon as he started getting it from suckers from MAGA, and then to be fair to the MAGA guys, they didn't know that he was a crook back then. They know now. So, and they're still giving to him. So that's for whatever it's worth. But back then they give him the money, and then you know what he did? He started charging them for rent at Trump Tower because he was using it for his campaign office. It didn't look like he was using it at all. He took up a giant amount of space and increased the rent by 4x. Come on, you think rent went up by 4 times as soon as he started using campaign funds instead of his own money? No, he's at least as big a criminal and a fraud as George Santos. But since he was already in power, half the country loves him.